Welcome back to Citizen Power Breakfast. Now it's time for our interview, and we're going to look at education. Now, education falls under the social pillar of Vision 2030. Now, with teachers' strike having recently been concluded and primary schools reopened, attention now turns to whether our education system is in fact delivering learning outcomes, and if initiatives like the One Laptop per Child will play a role in improving literacy and numeracy amongst children. Well, we are joined today in studio by Dr. Sarah Ruto. She is the regional manager of Uwezo East Africa, and before joining Uwezo, she was a lecturer at the Nairobi University for 15 years, focusing on research in primary and secondary reform. Thank you very much, Dr. Ruto, for coming to studio. Very warm welcome to Citizen Power Breakfast.
Karibu.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Dr. Ruto, I think we should just start by, if you could just explain what Uwezo is and what it aims to achieve. What does Uwezo do?
Uwezo is an East African initiative, so we are operational in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. And I think that the Kiswahili term Uwezo explains what we are all about. We are about finding out the capabilities, the abilities of children. Very often, I think we invest a lot of time in getting children to school, but I don't think we take as much attention to find out what are they doing in school. So while we pivot at the basic levels, I think this is a question that you could ask yourself, you know, in the entire school pipeline. I know, for example, that the industry is asking, is the university giving us the kind of person that we want? So this is the whole question of outcomes. When children go to school, when learners go to school, are they getting the skills and competencies that are required? And that is our main focus.
Okay, fantastic. So I'm curious, how do you actually measure this? How do you measure literacy, numeracy, and the learning outcomes in schools?
We do it by conducting national assessments. And there's a whole science about national assessments, and there are very many that are there. In Africa, perhaps the best is the SACMEC, Southern African Consortium for Measuring Educational Quality. So there are quite a number that are there, and we fit in that family. And we have decided to pivot on basic skills. And this is because of our approach. We figured that if we pivot on basic skills and we use the class 2 as the measure of our tests, and we do it in the households. So we decided if we use a class 2 test, it means that everybody, from the administrator to the parent, because we administer in the households, would be able to understand this whole aspect of learning outcomes. Because I think sometimes it is very important to demystify some of these concepts that educationists understand very well. Because education is not consumed by educationists. It's consumed by all of us. And therefore, we all need to understand. And that is why the national assessments is what we use, but the approach in itself is perhaps what we think is more important. The fact that we utilize everybody, the data collectors are from the villages that are selected, and they need at least to have 12 years of schooling. The test is not done in the school, it's done in the household, because we want to take learning, schooling back to the people, demystify that it is something for the professionals, because we must all be involved if we want to improve the competencies.
So what do? You come to home and you find my child who is in standard 2. You give them a test. What happens? So yes, that we have the credibility, because there is a lot of curiosity about whether your statistics are accurate. So what is it that you do exactly when you come?
First and foremost, we have been researchers. Those of us who are managing Uwezo have been educational researchers for a long time. And we understand very well why it is important that a methodology that is used has to be robust.
Yes.
Because the findings that we are giving will have national implications. So that was the first thing that we did. And if you look at the sampling, it is done by people from the Bureau of Statistics. If you look at the tests, they're developed by experts of this land. So if you doubt the methodology, you're doubting the whole nation, as it were, because those are the people who are involved. But to come to your question, the approach in itself is that we, in each district, we decided that we want to have information that is relevant at a district level. If you look at very many studies, they often used the province. And so we go for large scale. In fact, when we are talking about having tested more than 150,000 children, in all the 156 districts in this country, census districts. Only 2 did not participate. And in those, we go to 30 enumeration areas, sometimes which are equivalent to villages, but just for conversation, we normally use the word villages, but these are enumeration areas. And in each of them, we have identified 2 enumerators, data collectors, whom we call volunteers, and they must come from that particular village, so they are known. And then a simple listing is done to select 20 households in each. And so this is where, because these are people, first of all, who come from the area, the chief has to be involved, the elder has to be involved. So it is something in which village conversation already happens to ease entry. When you get there, you introduce, say what it is. All children aged 6 to 16 are administered this simple test. And it is very important that even children who are above the curriculum expectation of our test are given the test, because this is about getting the basic competencies. Very often children go to school and actually are moving on and yet are not acquiring the skills, and we don't have any system of catching it. And so that is why we administer the test even to 16-year-olds. And quite often, as the results show, sometimes there are children who are in class 8 who cannot do class 2 level work. And that for me is serious.
Isn't it possible that you go to a village, you get a child to do some test? This is not school work. So the children, instead of being serious about it, so you think they fail, but they don't fail. It's because the environment is not school environment. So when you do the tests, they probably don't do it properly because it's just a joke. They are doing it at home.
And I think that is the...
Is that not possible?
That is an attitude that I think needs to be demystified. Education is not about schooling. It is not doing something because you're in a school environment. It is about getting skills that will allow you to navigate life. So what we do in our test, and the second part is that our test, the way it is designed, is able to tell what skill you have. Whether you're in school or in church, if I give you something to read, you should be able to read if you have the ability to read. And that is what we are able to tell. It has nothing to do with the school environment. And I think taking a discussion to that is now confusing education with schooling. We are about education. Competencies are about education. Schooling is the rote. Schooling is going to school, is reporting there, but not necessarily learning. And so I think we need that distinction.
For us who have done education, we know the difference. But ordinary people don't know the difference between schooling and education. Schooling is education. They are one and the same thing.
I think you're
ordinary
wrong.
People.
You're wrong when you say ordinary people. I don't know what you mean by ordinary people. Ordinary people know that my child is not doing well. And they see the evidence because the child does not progress. You don't even need to be literate to be able to understand the term quality. So we just need to be a little bit generous and actually meet people halfway. The fact that, for example, a Mama Mboga or somebody in the village is not demanding the same as you is not because they don't know. Maybe it is because their life circumstances are different. And that is where the infrastructure of the educators need to reach out and give that right.
Okay, so I'm curious to find out from the report that you have published, how representative is it in terms of your sampling? For you to say that, as is in the standard, over 50% of A-class pupils can barely read, to have such a strong statement, how representative is the research that you've done in terms of the report?
The children who cannot, class 8 children who cannot do class 2 level work, are I think 11 who cannot do division, and perhaps 7 who cannot read a class 2 level story. But the lower down you go, the statistic becomes bigger. So I think the 50% is referring to class 4, class 5, cannot actually do class 2 level work. It is a very representative sample. There is nobody else. We do the largest study. In fact, we are the largest after the national census. Nobody else does as large a study as us. We go to all the districts in East Africa. And I have gone through, and in each of them, we go to 30 enumeration areas, which is statistically significant. And we use the district as the measure of calculating the results that you have come with. So it is a very large sample. And we don't need to go to such a large sample. But we think that the process of getting this knowledge needs to involve as many citizens so that they can understand. So it doesn't matter which corner you go to. If you go to Turkana, you will find that there are about 60 people who participated in this. And they'll be able to tell you what I'm telling you because they participated, because the data they were collecting became knowledge to them because they were empowered to do that. And that is the reason why our sample is so large. Not because of the statistical it's demanded, but because of the approach, what we want to get at the end of it all.
Okay, well...
So what is it you want to get after you publish it? I'm sure you did a report like this last year.
And the other year.
And the other year.
And we'll probably continue doing it.
So?
Because we want...
What is the impact in the system? After you know this, are we going to change?
Changing is you and I. Change does not come from anywhere. It is you and I. And knowledge, information, can play a critical role in informing you to make certain decisions. And so we feel that as education researchers, we have a particular role to play. And one of them is to ensure that we have evidence that informs us. Why is this critical? This is because, for example, if you look at the 70s, we used to use quasi measures to measure if we are learning. We used to say that if you have gone to school for 2 and 3 years, surely you know how to read and write. Now, that is a quasi measure, and perhaps that is why we went through 30 years of independence and we had not realized that actually the problem is as simple as this and can be rectified very simply. It's all about giving handwriting classes, which used to be there, no longer there. It's about, very simple measures that will ensure the foundation is right. So our thinking is that evidence is important because it is systematically collected, and anything that is systematically collected is knowledge. You can choose to use the knowledge, and if you decide not to use the knowledge, then really you
So who are you addressing this report?
To you.
I'm not bothered.
Why aren't you bothered?
I don't have children.
I imagine maybe you don't have children,
yeah,
but you don't...
What role can I play?
A big one. Because the whole aspect, I think many times we have thought that the whole purpose of learning belongs to the teacher. The person who plays a bigger and perhaps motivating role, I think, is the parent. And if you are not the owner, and even if you don't have a child, maybe you have a grandchild, or you are surrounded with people who have children. You are a citizen of the world and a citizen of Kenya. Therefore, you have your responsibilities. Yeah. And it is important that you know the role that you need to play. Very often, I remember Ngugi wa Thiong'o. Ngugi wa Thiong'o has had a very empowering story that he told. And he said that when he came home from school every other time, he was a bright child, always the first in his class. And whenever he'd come and tell his mother, I'm number one, his mother had never gone to school. But she was this gentle woman who would ask him, is that the best you could be? And it puzzled him because he wondered, beyond number one, what is the best you could be? 0? It really puzzled him. And then when he was at school, there was a teacher who also wanted, had seen this as a bright child, was encouraging him. So because he had this gentle nudge from a mother who was not literate and had a teacher who responded to him, you can see this is a child that excelled. The motivator is the parent, grandparent, uncle, and aunt. That is why I say you have perhaps a bigger and critical role to play. Secondly, when it comes to managing schools, you're not going to sit and wait for the Ministry of Education. Yes, they have the Quality of Assurance department, and they have their role to play. But so do we as communities who run the schools. Today, the middle class have flown. There's a flight from the public school to the private sector. And I'm not going to blame them because, you're taking the best decision you have for your child. But perhaps we need to sit and ask ourselves, if the state is spending so much on the public education sector, does it make economic sense, moral sense to flee, or should we perhaps take the time to fix? And fixing is not going to come from the top. It will come from the community of citizens. Therefore, you have a role.
Absolutely, I would absolutely agree with you. And something that I would like to discuss is the findings of your report. It's here in the newspaper. What would you say the overall observations of the report that you have published?
I would say one that has been there since we started in 2010, and that is because our test is pegged at the grade 2 level, the best group to look at to assess if we are learning the expected skills at the right time are the grade 3 children. And throughout, for the last 3 years, it has been the case that only 3 out of 10 children in grade 3 can do grade 2 level work. The problem begins very early. And especially I'd like to address the public school. So often we wait until KCP results are being released, and then there is this cry that children from private schools will take all the places, school places, etc., etc. The reality check is that some of these things begin 6 years earlier on, 7 years earlier on, and nobody is paying attention. Absenteeism of the lower levels is higher than the higher levels, because in the higher levels, people are already gearing up for examination. Yeah. So you're getting serious. You're taking all your best teachers to the higher levels.
So absenteeism of teachers?
Yeah.
Of teachers and also of learners. We collect data from over 4,500 schools, a little bit over 10% of the total public primary schools in Kenya. And it shows that absenteeism, though it has decreased a little bit since last year, which is very good, teacher absenteeism is still 10 teachers do not attend schools on any given time out of 100.
Okay, I'd like to just discuss some of the other findings of your report. Could you just enlighten us on the sort of gender disparity that you noted in literacy?
Not much. If anything, girls slightly do better than boys, apart from what you call the northeastern province. Or if you go to Rift Valley and you pull out districts such as West Pokot, girls would be worse than boys. But generally, girls shows slightly better. But these, again, are foundational skills, very basic skills in literacy and numeracy that we are talking about. We know that the higher up the pipeline, something happens, things change. Maybe socialization issues come in, etc.
Could you think of a reason, perhaps, why there is that sort of slight improvement with females over males?
It's a very slight one, almost statistically insignificant. But for me, what it shows is that boys and girls, as they start off, really are on a very equal
level playing field.
Yeah, they're able to learn and acquire these competencies equally the same. In literacy, it has always been said anything to do with words, with speaking, girls acquire speech much earlier on, and maybe this could be the reason why you will see this advantage earlier on.
Okay. Also, the report sort of talked about the performance across regions. I don't know if you could discuss your findings in regard to that.
Yes. Other than providing district-specific data, which I think I would urge anybody to still look at that, we are also able to put the districts together into the counties. And so we have been able to give county-specific data, which I think is going to be important to help counties, especially now that they're in their own governance structures and have to make decisions. And the finding, again, is that Nairobi is ranked high, and a number of districts in central Kenya do very well in the basic literacy and numeracy, foundational skills. At the bottom are the arid districts. It's not new. We always know. You could almost tell that this is the statistic you're going to get.
And what about the findings of your report this year in comparison to previous years? Are there any trends that you're observing?
Only that really there is hardly any change. I know that 3 years is perhaps too short a time to make a longer trend analysis. But as we go on, because we are going to do this next year, the other year, we should be able to see. But as of now, when we looked at our results now and previously, the results are actually the same.
Okay, fantastic.
You have told us that the report is for everybody.
Yes.
But specifically, isn't there some people some organization that either counties or the Ministry of Education or whoever who is supposed to deal with it and see that there's improvement?
Yeah, if you look at education, who has the primary mandate of offering education? It is the Ministry of Education. So at the end of it all, we are saying that the Ministry of Education needs to ensure that it is accessing not only education to everybody, but it is an education of quality in which children are learning. So they will be a very core audience for our report. We have always engaged with them, and actually favorably so. If anything, we are hosted by the National Assessment Center that is in the Kenya National Examinations Council. So in many ways, that they allow this to happen and associate with such an endeavor shows that at least the Ministry of Education also wants to know, to institute assessment procedures that can inform itself if we are meeting the curriculum expectations. So that is a very critical audience that is there. But because, as I said before, we are household-based, a very critical audience for us as well are parents, mwananchi, which has often not been the case, but we think it is important to have an inclusive approach in addressing education matters.
What would happen if you do this test in schools instead of at home?
They are done. They are done.
If you say you are doing these things at home, the imagination is that kids have left school. Now you tell them to do tests or to tell them to read the things. They will not be serious.
Why shouldn't they be? If they are not serious in school, they will not be serious in life. School is about preparing you for life. It is not about ghettoing you to an environment, number one. But number two, there are many other assessments that are done in school. Okay. So we felt that there is no point of us replicating. About 2 years ago, again, the National Assessment Center, that is the government, did a school-based test, I think targeting grade 3 and grade 6. You have what you call the early grade learning, EGRA. It is also done in school. So there are quite a number. In fact, everything is done in school. Ours is the only one that has chosen a different approach of the home because we want to bring people to be actively involved in learning.
So I'm curious to find out from you, what are some of the challenges that you see in terms of achieving learning outcomes?
Learning belongs to what I've often now called the amorphous term of quality. And if you look at all our education documents, it is stated very clearly that we want quality. We want quality. But when you ask yourself, what is this quality? It becomes elusive. And so one of the things which we felt would be important is to break it into biteable portions, if you like. And one of them is actually to focus at the end. Rather than just focusing at the start, you focus at the end. See what do you get once you go to the end of the pipeline. And for us to be able to get there, I think for me, first and foremost, it probably just requires a change of ethos, a change in the way we do things. And the reason I say this is that if you look at certain schools, even certain public schools, they have the same resources. School A has the same resources as School B, teachers trained in the same place, children from the same environment, and yet School A is doing very well. It has figured it out. Why is it that it is able to do that? For me, it is the soft issues. Perhaps it is the school leader that they have who is aiming high. It could be that they are motivating the teachers in a particular way. It could be they're involving parents in a particular way. And these are the things that I think, the soft ways, how to manage an institution, how education is about nurturing the best in a child. It is about figuring that, and that's why I'm saying these are the soft issues that I think will matter more as we go ahead and will help us achieve the learning outcomes. A number of us are children of this system, but I think we are the survivors. We are the people who maybe the curriculum fitted us better. We need more and more to think about the people who are excluded, and they can be part of the system rather than being outside it.
Earlier on, you talked about being taught how to write with the hands. Now we are going to have computers next year.
Yes. And
handwriting. Our handwriting will be, it will not be encouraged because it will be touch. Is technology, what I'm asking, is technology going to help us or is it going to ruin?
technology is an enabler.
Yes.
It is not an end in itself.
Yes.
So if we think that when we get technology, it will result in a magical learning experience, that's where we go wrong. I think it is a good opportunity. We have seen how the telephone has revolutionized. But again, if you take the whole telephone, we know very well that if you go to certain communities, it is only used for voice, not for written. So if you want to exploit that gadget, be it a telephone, be it a laptop, whatever it is, the whole aspect of literacy and numeracy is very critical. And that is why the foundational skills come in. And so I don't think for me it's really an either or, because when you are writing, you have different conditions going on. You know, there's a different psychomotor, different functions in the brain going on. And I know that there are some people who, when they want to write a creative piece, will never go to the laptop first. They'll actually start by writing because it helps them to think in a particular way. So I think it's not an either or. Let us keep all of them. Let us teach the skill of writing. That is where you're also going to get your artists, people who flourish with a pen. And let this gadget come in. If I was to be asked how it should come in, I think first of all it's just important to teach people about it in itself, you know, have a lesson where you just teach about it. Then progressively you start now introducing it to support learning. When a teacher wants to research, they're able to go, and so it has to be broader than a tablet, so that it has particular kind of information that will allow you to interact better. There's a lot of potential. It is an enabler.
So
but if we stop and we put all our thinking on security matters, then it's going to be like what we saw with our textbooks. There were textbooks in schools, but what were they doing? They were locked up in cupboards.
Yeah.
So do you actually think that this one laptop per child initiative is going to be a tool that will enhance learning outcomes and therefore improve literacy and numeracy?
It can be a tool. Whether it will be depends on its implementation, but it can be.
Okay. All right, fantastic.
But isn't it a fact that because of that technology, that people don't write anymore?
I beg to differ. I mean, for example, with this tablet, it's got a writing application to it.
Yes, but that's that. But how many of us have this? How many have that facility? What I'm saying is that modern people who are young people today, the way you write letters to girlfriends and can be creative, it doesn't happen anymore. People don't write.
No, in fact, in the texting generation,
they just text.
Yeah, and they are very swift at it, much swifter than I'll ever be. And I think that is good, and that is given.
Yeah.
But it does not mean that you do not have other options. So let us teach our writing, which you teach in the lower grade, and it remains with you for life.
Fantastic. Well, fortunately, we're out of time. Don't know if you have any more additional comments or anything you'd like to ask Miss Dr. Ruto?
No, I think that's all.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
We hope that people accept this report and consume it and use it.
Beginning with you, if you lead the way, I'm sure many others will follow.
Absolutely, Matege. All the pressure is on you. Spotlight is on you. Fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Ruto, so much for coming to the studio. We really appreciate that very enlightening report there. Some interesting statistics and an interesting approach, a holistic approach to learning and learning outcomes. So thank you very much for coming to studio. There you go. That is our interview with Dr. Ruto from Uwezo about learning outcomes. Right, we're going to take a short break and afterwards we'll be back with news.